Hello, hello. Welcome to another live. Today we're going to talk about working with groups using IFS. It's not going to be an in-depth conversation, but just some highlights, maybe an invitation that you can start doing that yourselves as well. And then I have a question that was sent to my email, and I'm going to answer that. And then if folks have questions, they can post them in the chat, and we're going to answer those questions and hopefully have a conversation. So a couple of weeks ago, I was doing the final consultation for one of our stepping stones cohorts, and someone asked about working with groups, right? And whether I knew someone that was doing that. And right now, I don't know anyone that is running groups. And by the way, if you're running groups and you're using IFS and you want to let me know that you're doing it, if it's a specific group, you can let me know because people have been asking about it. But then I said, I run groups myself. Most of the groups that I run are in person. I've been thinking about offering an online option for folks that are around the world. But I've found great benefit. And as someone that runs groups, it's incredibly rewarding. But more specifically for the clients that are being a part of those groups. If my clients, they can do individual therapy and group therapy at the same time, it's so much better than just doing one or just doing the other. So every time that I have the opportunity to recommend to my clients that they do groups at the same time as they're doing individual therapy, I do it. And not all of them take my advice, but some of them do, and there's a lot to be gained. But what was surprising to me was the number of people that were interested in that cohort to learn more about working with groups, right? So I thought that I would bring a couple of thoughts about how come we should be running IFS groups and a couple of things that we do in an IFS group. So let me first talk to you about how come. Why would you run an IFS group? Why is it beneficial for someone to be in a group setting rather than just do individual therapy? So lots of us have a therapist and have a good therapeutic relationship with that person. And that's great. And there's a lot that can be done in the individual therapy. But there are some things that only happen when you are in a group. For example, real-time live practicing speaking for your parts. You can do it with your therapist, but you're going to be prompted to do it much more often, and it's going to feel much closer to the challenges that you face in your life. So there are a lot of skills that you get to practice immediately, right? Your parts, your protectors, they tend to show up differently when they are in a group versus when they are one-on-one. There are many parts, for example, parts that track, do I belong here? That show up in group settings and don't show up so much in one-on-one. So a group is a great opportunity for people to become aware of those parts that are more group focused and group oriented. Also, classically, we think about attachment and we think about this connection with caregivers, right? This me connecting to you. Oh, hello, Donna. Me connecting to you, right? So we think about attachment in this way, and we think about secure attachment in these dyadic relationships. Well, actually, historically, if we look at the way that human beings, they mature, In the past, you would have this relationship with your caregivers, but very soon you would start developing relationships with people in the community. And so you would learn to have these connections. And becoming an adult, traditionally for human beings, was about moving from the family unit in these relationships that I have here. I'm the son, I'm the daughter, whatever this type of relationship, to I'm a member of the community. So becoming a member of a community is a coming of age event. So we have parts that actually attach to groups. And if we don't have a healthy group that we can attach to, that's something that's missing. It's a fundamental human need that's missing. And so lots of us in our lives nowadays live lives that are individual lives in our homes, in our little family units, and maybe we are part of this, you know, group here or that group there that meets every now and then, but we don't actually have real communities. We don't have a sense of belonging to a group. We don't have a sense of, if something bad happens to me, there are all these people that actually care about me, know me, and will be there for me. And so running groups is an opportunity to offer that to people. And that can be incredibly healing for people to have a sense of, I belong here, and there are all of these people that actually care about what's happening in my life, that are here to witness me and what happens to me. So that's the reason why I think offering groups to folks is incredibly important, and that's why I do it. Also, there is something about going into a process, because one of the things that I do when I run groups is, at some point I'm going to center somebody. I'm going to say, hey, would you like us to go into this with you? Right? And so we might put the person in the center of the group, or just focus on that person for a little bit, and we will go into some parts work with that person. Now, it's very different for a person to be with their parts one-on-one with me versus be with their parts with a group full of self energy, loving presence, just being there and witnessing. There is something magical that happens, and there are some things that happen in a group setting that will only happen in a group setting. They could never happen on one-on-one. And so the ability to experience the self energy as a group phenomenon is just amazing, and it's beautiful when it happens. The other thing that happens in groups is, one of the things I will do in a group is I'll do meditations, and all a meditation really is a little guidance on how to be with your parts by yourself. When we are working with a client one-on-one, it's not very typical for us to say, hey, we're going to do a little meditation on it, 10-15 minute meditation. You're going to be with your parts by yourself, right? We have therapist parts that think, I'm being paid for this, I better, show up and do something productive. I'm not just going to offer a 15-minute meditation here. But in a group setting, that's different. And it's important because as they do the meditation, and it's for the whole group, they get to be with their parts, and they learn how to be with their parts by themselves while being supported by that group container. And then later, they get to hear other people and get perspective. And they will hear both people that are really different from them, and they'll be like, oh, wow, there's a different experience there in the world, and I didn't even think that was possible. But they will also hear people that are just like them, and that can be incredibly validating for parts. Oh, there's someone else that thinks and feels the same way that I do, or in a similar way. So that can be great. So what do we do in an IFS group, right? There's a whole bunch of things that we can do, but we will do meditations. We might do a little bit of a psychoeducation and teach a little piece, and then get them to practice, for example, a very basic thing that I like to teach groups is how to speak for parts versus speaking from parts. We do check-ins, and the check-in is also learning how to track your system and speak for parts. So that's a skill that's developed. They look inside and say, there's this part of me that's feeling this way, that part of me that's feeling that way, that part of me that's feeling that way. They get those parts, they get validated, they get heard by the facilitator, but also by the other participants in the group. We might work with some specific themes, right? So for example, we might do one meeting or a number of meetings that are about grief. And so we might begin with a meditation around welcoming the love that we have felt for the things that we have lost, for example. And then we might do a little conversation where it's just a prompt, like, what have you learned? What have your families taught you about how do you grieve? And then we go around and we listen. And then we might go into how did your parts respond to the way that your family taught you to grieve, or what are the parts that, or what did your parts learn, or what are the strategies that your parts adopted to deal with that specific thing. So we can focus on a specific theme and explore that as a theme. We could explore types of parts. For example, we could explore firefighters around food and eating. And so that can be a very rich conversation. Then again, at some point, we might center someone, right, and go deeper in the process with that person. In a group setting, we can also do lots of externalizing, especially if we use psychodrama. So we might go into someone's process, into someone's system, and then as we're mapping those parts, we say, hey, you choose someone to be this part of you. And then, hey, can you be this part? What would this part say? What does it look like? How does it behave? Right? And then if we're doing it in person, we can set it around the room and we can walk around and check the system from different perspectives. We can switch roles with the different parts. We can hear parts in the polarization dialoguing with each other. So there's a whole bunch of playfulness that can happen in a group setting. And I mean, the possibilities of what we can do with the group are infinite. But one last thing that I will mention is I like to also use groups to do something that I learned from Mukara Meredith, who does Matrix Works, and she calls tracking teams. And basically, we just get different topics, and we just track how our parts are showing up right here, right now in this group setting. So it's bringing our relationship into focus. For example, I might say, okay, today we're going to do a tracking team around parts that are helping us be in and parts that are keeping us out, right? So we are tracking this thing about engagement and belonging. So what parts of me feel like they belong here? What does that feel like? How do I embody them? What do they say to me? What are their beliefs? What do they do? What parts of me are keeping me outside, not belonging, not participating, not engaging? How come they're doing that? So we get to track that. We can do something around conflict, how we deal with conflict. We can do a tracking theme around the things that I hold inside that I don't speak. We can do one about speaking my truth or having agency. So there are, or we can do one about how self-energy is showing up and how I'm tracking self-energy showing up in this group. And that can be a lovely conversation and a beautiful tracking team. So these are just some ideas, some things that I will do with the group. And hopefully this will inspire you to learn more about groups and to maybe run your own group at some point. So if you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat. And I'm going to start answering questions by answering one that I got in my email. So a student sent me this email saying, "Hi, Gustavo. In your next YouTube live, could you please say more about how you concluded that when clients say their childhood was great, this points to emotional neglect? I understand that protectors are very present, but couldn't there be any other reason? I'm working with one such client. I won't be able to attend live, but I'll watch the video later." Okay, so how do I conclude that if my client says my childhood was great, that probably means emotional neglect? So, so what I said in the last YouTube live is clients that have a pretty solid, secure upbringing, when they come to therapy, oftentimes what I'm hearing from them is not everything was great, but really, oh, I love this and I love that, and I didn't like this so much and I didn't like that so much. So they can hold perspective very well. But if a client comes and there's only one perspective that is possible about their childhood, which was, it was great, my mother was great, my father was great, they were very loving, that often indicates that that a childhood had to be idealized, that there was a protector that had to make it ideal for some reason. And oftentimes it's connected to emotional neglect. Oftentimes it's connected to, there's something off about this, there's something missing for me here, but I don't know exactly what it is. Emotional neglect is like that. A kid doesn't really get what neglect is. It just feels there's something off, but concludes, but there must be something wrong with me, right? Because everybody else seems to be okay, right? Because oftentimes the family's not talking about emotions or not talking about what's bad or difficult, whatever. And so the child concludes, there must be something wrong with me. They're okay, they're great. And then usually with these clients, as we continue to work together, at some point we will go deeper into their system, and we're going to get a protector that's like, I don't know if I want to go there. And then we're going to listen to those concerns. Oftentimes the concerns are concern about overwhelm, it's going to be too much. And a lot of times it doesn't even make sense to them. Like, why would it be too much? I don't even know what's there. Sometimes the concern is, oh, it's going to change the way that I feel about my family, about my childhood. So how did I conclude that, if a client says my childhood was great, that it's likely connected to emotional neglect? Actually, it's just from experience. In the beginning, clients said that, I was like, okay, well, then I guess this is me as like someone young and new, with my first few clients. They said, I'm just here because I think therapy is a good idea, but I had a great childhood. And I thought, oh, great, but what can I help you with? If your life is great, then what are we going to do together? But then as we developed the relationship and they started to open up, then little by little, it's like, yeah, I really don't feel satisfied. There's something missing. Feels like there's an emptiness, and I start stuff and I don't finish, and I don't know what that's about. I was great in school, but I never had to study very much. But then I went to college, and I don't know, I felt a little depressed. I was not doing as well. Everybody seemed to have some skills that I didn't have then, and I had to really apply myself. And they either like really start applying themselves and become workaholics, and shift into I cannot rest anymore. They might, report cycles of like working very hard and then burning out and then not being able to work for a while. So there are a few things that will indicate that this client did not have support at specific stages in their lives, which is a symptom of emotional neglect. So if you're interested in learning more about emotional neglect, in November, at the end of November, I'm doing a full weekend course where I go into how emotional neglect happens, the different types of setups that we have, the different parts that adopt specific strategies for dealing with emotional neglect, the usual types of polarizations that we have when the client is emotionally neglected, and then how to make a plan and work with emotional neglect. And we also talk about the ways that we get emotionally neglected that are in different layers that impact us, right? So how our school experience, our immediate society and culture and situation in the country, and how I identify and how that's viewed in that culture, country, community, etc., can be neglectful towards who I am, right? For example, if you're someone on the spectrum and you're growing up in a place where people have no information about how to relate to you, right? Then you're of course you're going to be emotionally neglected, not just by your caregivers, but by people in general. They're going to be missing you, right? They're going to be misinterpreting and misunderstanding who you are and how you're showing up in the world as a person. So there's that invitation there. Donna says, I'm curious what you would use to screen people or ascertain that they were ready for an IFS group. Mm-hmm. Also, how much training does a person need to run a group? I love the idea of it. You have made it sound so wonderful. Okay. So running groups is not all that hard. But it's nice if you have specific training, because there are some skills that are group specific. I'm thinking of I'm making a proposal to IFSCA right now, and we're going to run an interest list probably to see if there are enough people interested. But if enough people are interested, I'm thinking about doing a 4-month course where we get to practice it together as a group and then talk about what we are doing there. That should be enough to get people feeling confident to run groups. What would you use to screen people or ascertain that they were ready for an IFS group? That's a great question. So that question really depends on the type of group that you're running. Because there's no specific answer, but really the type of group is going to dictate the type of people that can be there. I'll give you an example. So I've run for a long time groups that were focused on the LGBTQIA2S plus population, and that meant that I also got a lot of people that were on the spectrum. So those groups are basically open to anybody that wanted to participate. But what did I have to do? I had to be progressive. I had to bite size with the activities that I used in the group. So it's not so much whether like the person is ready for the group. I think almost anyone can be ready for a group unless they are really, really disruptive, but then they're really not going to be able to stay there, right? The group is not going to allow the person to continue. Although, I've never had to kick anyone out of a group that I've been a part of. But if the person has just basic like relational skills, they can listen to another person. And they can like have a dialogue. That should be like, for me, that's like enough, and they're interested. They want to be there. There's a reason why they're choosing to be there. Other than that, I will make adjustments to make the group comfortable and safe enough for them. And I will work with the group to slowly progress towards where we want to go, but bite sizing. I'll give you an example. I run groups in person because I'm also a biodanza facilitator. So what I usually do is I'll do 3-hour meetings. And the first hour and a half, we do psychotherapy. People come in, we start with a check-in, and then we might do different things, right? Tracking team, or we might just work on a specific theme, or we might do a specific exercise with the group. It might be more psychoeducation, and then send them into dyads or small groups to debrief or whatever it is. When that portion of the meeting is done, we take a little break, and then we come back and I do music and movement exercises. So working with this population, lots of folks on the spectrum, there were a lot of people that, for example, they couldn't be there in the room when people were in dyads or small groups because it was too chaotic, the noise. So what did we have to do? In this room that I had, there was a little glass door and an outside area. So we had some chairs for people that needed less noise to go outside when we did that type of exercise. They also had the permission to take a break or to use noise canceling earbuds or headphones. So we just found ways of adapting the group to make it comfortable enough for them. Talking about the dance and movement part, there were some people that they couldn't touch each other. It was like too much. It was overwhelming for them to be touched by other people. So I organized a number of sessions where there was no physical contact. And then one day I decided, okay, let me try a little physical contact. Let me just have them walk past each other and just like do a handshake and see how that goes. For one of the members, that was too much. The member was overwhelmed, had to leave. And thankfully we had already established that it was okay to go out of the room for a few seconds. It was also okay to go to the sofa, or it was okay to go to the outside area. So we had some agreements of like, what do you do if you need to self-regulate if it's too much for you? And so that was too much for that one participant. Next session, again, we just do a regular no touching. And then the next session, I go like, let me do less. A handshake was too much. So today we're going to walk around and we're just going to high five each other. And that was fun. So it was more fun than a handshake. And that was okay. And that participant was like high fiving people, and that was fine. 2-3 months later, that same person was able to offer hugs and be hugged by the other participants. So this, of course, this is not specific to IFS, but it's just an illustration of this bite sizing that we will do in a group that can actually make the group inclusive. So rather than thinking about like who is okay and ready to be in my group, I'm thinking, how can I set up the group in a way that can be really welcoming to the people that are coming? Of course, that being said, if you run a specific group that has some population in mind, then anybody that doesn't really fit that population then is going to be excluded. And that's fine to run special interests or affinity groups. I think they're lovely. In my case, the group that I ran, it was an affinity group. It was for LGBTQIA2S+ folks, but it was open to folks on the spectrum, and it was really open to anybody. But it was like, this is the theme of the group, but anyone is welcome. right? And so we did have folks that did not identify as an LGBT person, but were part of the community because they had lots of friends that were, and they wanted to come, and it was a good interchange. So Donna is saying the 4-month classes are too expensive for me. Donna, that's a great point, and we do want to be inclusive. And so maybe, maybe we should begin with a little workshop and just give folks some more information about this, and maybe see if they want to get further education in that specific topic. But I'll think about that more. Okay, if anyone else has questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and I can answer them. Otherwise, we're just going to end our live in a little bit. So Donna says, what you were talking about here in these specific makes me wonder if the education and training that I had when I was getting my counseling degree is sufficient. Donna, I think very few people actually get any training at all about working with groups. So there are a few things that you can do. You can, for example, begin co-facilitating. Invite someone that has more experience running a group and say, hey, can we run a group together? I really want to learn from you. And then you learn from that person. So when I ran a group in connected to the local health clinic, the public health clinic, a few years ago. And this group was for low-income folks. And so basically the public health clinic, anybody that came to them and the cases were too difficult for them, you're getting like fibromyalgia, you're getting major depressive disorder, you're getting bipolar disorder, like getting all of those diagnoses, they were all sending them to me, right? To that group. And so you got all types of cases and diagnoses in that group. And I had a person that was new, and she was she had just become a biodance facilitator, and she was learning how to be a biodance facilitator. And so when we started running those groups, first week, someone goes into a panic attack in the group. She didn't know what to do. But luckily enough, I had the training and I took care of it, and she just watched and she learned, right? We had someone pass out in the middle of the group. Something was too much for the person. Like a whole bunch of these things that will make you really scared if you're running a group for the first time in person. She got to see how I handled them. And most of it is like, it's just the protectors are doing something extreme because it's overwhelming for them to be in that environment, and it's how they can manage, right? But that's a great tip, right? So if you don't feel confident in running a group yourself, say, hey, can you run a group with me? Find someone that can do it and co-facilitate. Co-facilitating groups is highly recommended because when you have two people that are facilitating a group, you get to see the different perspectives. Some things that you miss, the other person is going to see. You get to collaborate. You get to talk about the group, and you learn a lot from each other. So it's a great experience. I highly recommend that. Donna says, we took a course in running groups and had to run a group. It was phenomenal to see what could happen with the group. I have been wanting to get back in. Okay, so so maybe check your parts done and see like how come they're telling you that you're not ready, right? Of course, there will be things that happen that you cannot predict and you're not expecting and you're not ready for, just like everything we do in life. But then that's why we do consultations, right? And so begin a group, and if something comes up that you don't know how to handle, you can just say to the group, hey, everyone, this is new to me. I'm going to go get consultation and come back, and I will get back to you on this next week. And that's totally fine. You don't have to be the expert all the time and know everything. Okay, and we also have Michael. Michael says that he's listening in. Great. Nice to have you here, Michael. Okay, everyone. Any more questions before we close for the day? Oh, Les says I'm late again. Okay, Les, can you do my question from yesterday? Okay, Les, can you type your question again? If I remember, is you said something about IFSCA being the only organization that's doing some work around money parts. But if you could say more about what you mean by that and what your question is driving at. How IFSCA is the only IFS Avengers being explicit about money parts. So Les, just your thoughts, your choice of doing it with IFSCA. So I don't know if what you mean is the programs that we have run, if it's like the Rick's program on working with your money parts and the consultations that he's doing. Or if you're talking about Robin and the work that she has done. But I mean, I think money in parts is such an obvious thing, right? Of course, we have legacy. Les is saying it. I think it's awesome. Just surprised it's more explicit. I'm guessing saying it's not more explicit in IFS Institute. You are the only guys who have videos, workshops explicitly about money parts. Yeah, both Rick and Robin. Yeah, of course that our parts learn lessons around money. For example, I have this very interesting legacy burden that I got from my mother's side of the family that created an interesting relationship with money. So when something bad would happen in my mother's family, and there was a solution that was about like, let's just pay someone to fix this for us, my grandfather would say, oh, it's just money. Meaning, if we can use money to fix the problem, it's not that big of a deal. And I think what he meant by that is, if it's about your health, etc., that's more important, right? If it's money, you don't need to worry about it. Don't worry about spending money to fix this issue. Because if we can use money to fix the issue, it's not that big of a deal because we can make more money. We can work and we can make more money. But that comes down to my mother, then comes down to me. And so the way that I got that lesson is, you should not be concerned about money. And so for a very long time in my life, I felt bad about charging folks for my work. And then I didn't know how to take care of my money very well or make investments, right? And so that was a big deal. And I actually felt guilty. I felt bad if I was spending money in something that was luxurious, or if I made money. And so I really had to look at those parts and heal them to then be able to start charging what I'm worth and to be able to have money and save money and invest money and use the money to live life, to live a good life. So it's incredibly important that we look at money. And I highly suggest if you feel like you don't manage your money all that well, or there's more that you could learn about working with money, definitely take one of the courses that we are offering, because it kind of pays for itself, right? So Les says, so I'm going to make a raw joke here. I see it perhaps as a legacy burden related to different spheres, culture. Give a workshop to therapists about compassion in working with war refugees. But make a workshop about charging money for your worth. And you can even get aversive reactions. I think you get what I'm saying at here. Just trying to have some clarity in regards to this stuff. Thanks for the answer. Right. Yeah. So again, what you're driving at, last, is this cultural thing that we have in our field, which is it's bad to charge, right? Lots of us have that. Like lots and lots of people have a hard time charging their fees, asking for money in exchange for the work that they do. And there's a lot of confusion around this. One thing that I have done that makes it simple for me in relating to my clients is, I'm not charging my clients for my care and my love. I'm charging my clients for the time, because if I don't get paid, I cannot set that time aside to be with them, because I have to pay my bills and I have things that I need to do in my life. And I'm also charging them for the investments that I'm making in my education. That's all, right? I'm charging for my time, and I'm charging for the investments that I have to make. So that makes it simpler, right? So I get to have a real relationship with my clients. I'm lucky enough that I only work with clients that I like, that I can look at them and say, oh, I really appreciate this person. It's lovely to be here with you. It's wonderful to spend this time together. But this has no connection with how much they pay me. Zero. But people, they mistake that. They think, I'm charging for something that should be done out of my good heart, right? And so that's a little mix up, and I think we all actually carry that culturally. And you're right, some people might have parts that frown upon workshops around, like, how do you charge what you're worth? Yeah. So thanks for bringing that question up, Les. Okay, any other questions, or are we feeling complete for today? I just want to say, thank you all, you that are live and are watching this and come to the chat and have these conversations. This is incredibly nourishing for me to have people here that I can interact with, right? Otherwise, it would just be me and a camera. And your questions make this all the more interesting. And so if you have more questions, please send them to my email, gustavo@gmail.com. And I will answer them in the next YouTube live events that we have. Michael says, good discernment about money and caring. And then Les says, I'll see you at the Rick Kaler event, Gustavo, and perhaps as a stepping deeper or other workshop. Great. Looking forward to seeing you there, Les. Donna says, this is such a gift, Gustavo. Thank you so much. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.